Welcome everyone, this is the Fly Culture Podcast and I'm your host Pete Tigers. This is being recorded early season. The weather sucks, the rivers are unfishable, and I'm sure you're feeling like myself and my guest that you're missing standing in some water looking for trout or salmon. Our time will come, but in the meantime, I'm catching up with my friend Paul Procter to talk about a number of things that I know you're going to find interesting. Hey pal, it's great to speak with you. How are you doing?
Hey Pete, firstly thank you for the invite to chat with you. You've obviously pinned me down because the rivers are blown out, as I suspect they are for you as well, so it's an appropriate time. Yeah, I guess we're all like, we get cabin fever and we're bears with like sore heads at this time of year, especially when these are the conditions. We sat it out through winter, topped up the fly boxes, cleaned the fly lines, blah, blah, blah. We're raring to go. We're kind of getting snippets just now, but there's no settled spell or anything. So it's challenging. It's challenging.
Yeah, it felt like winter was really hard work, and I don't know if you were similar, but I just couldn't even get to do any grayling fishing. So really, I stopped fishing in October and couldn't really fish at all. Was it similar for yourself?
So I tend to fish through October a wee bit, Pete. I travel. I used to pursue grayling religiously, pretty much. That was, I'll tell you exactly when it was, until 2010. Then I discovered New Zealand and started sort of becoming a snowbird and wintering down there for an appreciable amount of time and fishing. I know you've been, we've exchanged notes on that, chatted about that. And then while I was gearing up for that, I'd tend to fish for trout. As you know, the season ends at different times. Our brown trout season ends on 30th of September. If I go down to Derbyshire, which I'm partial to, they've got till the 6th of October. If you go further south down to your neck of the woods, certainly on some of the chalk streams, you can get season close on the 15th of October. So in effect, I had 3 closing days, that kind of thing. And hey, look, the same happens at the start of the season. I think in Wales, the guys, Lee and Dave and the likes, their season opens 1st of March, and I've been known to sort of pester them, go down there for their opening. Our season begins 15th of March, and then the Yorkshire season begins on 25th of March. So I like 3 opening days and 3 closing days, Pete, in a nutshell. So yeah, getting back on track, the grayling fishing. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of a rest, and I view winter time because the rivers are high. A good time for me just to take stock, sit back. You just need a break from it, a couple of months to sort of just get yourself composed again. So yes, I miss it, but equally it's not at the top of my agenda.
And I know we were talking yesterday and you said that you were tying flies. For our listeners, are you the sort of person who will sit down, prepare all the materials, say, right, I'm going to tie, let's say, 3 dozen flies, sit and do those? Or do you sort of have a pain threshold where you think, actually, that's enough now? Or do you sit down and say, right, I'm going to do this, and when I'm done, I'm done?
Yeah, it's a good question, Pete. It's not difficult to answer. There's a few things going on. First of all, I do quite a bit of time for clients and customers, bespoke flies. Okay, which is nice, and they. First of all, it's good for me. Secondly, they get a really good product at the end of the day, which is important. You've just got to sit down some days. Some days you can set your stall out. I tend to tie in batches even for myself. It's like a dozen at a time or something like that. I know that perhaps sounds a lot. It's not me trying to brag or anything, because sometimes you sit down, you might do half a dozen, and it's just not falling into place. It's just not clicking. So for me, it's best leaving it, because I have, they've got to be of a certain standard. Even for me, I tend to fish slightly I wouldn't say rough flies, neatish flies, but they don't have to be perfect. So I'll sit down. Sometimes if it's I'm just in the moment and everything clicks, I can rattle out a lot of flies for want of a better word. Equally, I can sit down. Yesterday was one of them days. Sat down. It just wasn't rolling, and I just came away from it. And you've got to rest it like that. But generally, I do tend to tie in batches of a dozen, something like that. Tying for people is a bit more difficult because often I remember I used to tie commercially for a couple of companies and they'd send hooks up. I remember a batch of 500 hooks coming one time, Pete, spilled them out onto the table, and it is daunting looking at all them hooks thinking, geez, I've got to tie a bloody fly on every single one of those.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
It's as I call it, it's glorified piecework. People who say I'm a professional fly tyer, I respect them. I dabble. I have a set amount of customers and tie, and I do reach a threshold, and that's it.
And do you find then, from a time perspective, because there is a pressure, isn't there, when you're tying for other people, and the thought of emptying 500 bare hooks makes me frightened even just thinking about that. But it must be difficult in the sense that you've got to replicate the same one every single time. And I know that you're a stickler, as you've said, for quality, that it must be difficult to make sure everyone is exactly as the last one. That's a pressure in itself, isn't it?
It is. I mean, again, once you tend to get into your stride, certain patterns lend themselves to that. Not that you try and steer your customer down there. My customers will come and say, Paul, I want a dozen of your apps or a dozen of a pattern I've seen somewhere. And I usually, it's like anything, Pete. You've got to warm up. It's like fly casting. I know that you and I, and I'm guessing a lot of the listeners as well will religiously practice. And I find a little bit of a warm up. I guess it's like weight training or jogging or anything. And I find the first couple of flies I treat as a warm up. And if they're not quite on the mark, they're not rejected as such. I consider them misfires and they go into my fly box rather than to the client. Or better still, here's one for you, Pete. You just dab a little bit of super glue in the eye and give that one to your friend, and just watch, especially at the height of the hatch, and just watch them try to thread it up.
I like that one a lot. That's enough. I've not tied a fly. I can't even remember the last time I tied one. And it's fascinating what you say about feeling it and that sitting down. I've not had that feeling for over 2 years now that I've not wanted to sit down and tie a fly. But super glue over the eye of the hook is a good enough reason to come back. I'm not
Yeah.
sure my tying skills are as great as yours, so I don't think anyone ever grasps for my flies anyway, but that's enough to almost sort of bring me back. But you touched on the casting side of it as well, and we talked about feel. And I noticed I was fishing, I was up in Derbyshire not so long ago, and there wasn't a lot going on. We caught some fish, but from a cast, it was just really nice to stand in a real live situation rather than sometimes we go out on the grass or in a field or whatever that might be and practice our casting a little bit, but in a real situation. It's really nice to be able to do that and get those muscles, the muscle memory as you talk about, coming back again. Do you find similarly with your fly casting as well that a bit of practice and getting back into it is no bad thing?
Absolutely. So I probably, hopefully like to think I practice a little bit differently. I have friends who practice, and they'll go out, and obviously we work on our tracking and timing. This is all important, but it's easy when you're practicing just to get in this sort of repeat situation where you fling a cast out, pick up, lay down, and okay, it's going to sort of gain muscle memory that little bit quicker, but you just pretty much going through the motions. What I like to do, I set myself out with targets, and my practice is more about gauging distance, Pete. And it's funny that when you're crouching down and standing up, your perception of distance is quite different. So what I will do, I'll set myself some exercises, some challenges, whereby I actually cut out cardboard trout rather than hoops, and then I place these at different places on the field, and I imagine the rivers flowing one way or this way, and how much I need to lead the fish by. And then I'll do that standing up. But what I then wind the line in and pretend I've just arrived, kneel down and do it again. Do that again, because what that does, it disciplines you to gauge distance in how much line do I need off the reel to cover this fish. So that's something I picked up on going back to New Zealand the first time I went, and consequently spending time with people. One of the biggest issues or difficulties is judging distance when you arrive, for want of a better word, cold on a fish. It's all right if you're working up a pool with a fixed length of, say, 30 or 40 feet of line, and a fish rises 3 foot above where your maximum cast is. 3 paces forward, you're going to cover that fish with that fixed line. However, if you've just arrived and a fish starts rising, especially when you're stalking fish, it's all about that distance. So that's what I perceive my practice is doing things like that.
There you go, folks. That is why Paul is at the absolute top of his game. Cutting out cardboard trout seems perfectly normal behavior to me and to many people listening as well. But these are the sorts of things that I think, passing on your skill, expertise and knowledge to us is really, really cool. And like you say, with casting practice, it's very easy to do like those basic casts, isn't it? And think, well, that was all good. But those little extra things, or casting from other shoulders, or crossbody, or all those other sorts of things, makes it easier. And like you say, coming to the river warm, that you're not concentrating on the cast then, are you? You're concentrating on that fish and that situation.
Absolutely, that's the main focus for me, and often, and again, there are certain disciplines or mechanics that we need to follow with casting, which we both know tension is a key word. The fly line follows the path of the rod tip, etc., etc. And I will have periods where I practice that just to keep that edge, because for me, Pete, in a genuine fishing situation, casting sort of becomes secondary. My focus is on distance, and sometimes it becomes a little bit unorthodox and arguably ugly. It's not sort of platform casting, as I call it, but I have got a knack of being able to sort of get fly in front of fish when it's required, and that is, in essence, that is what fly casting is about.
Yeah, great tips again. So thank you for that. And you've said, I, like many others, consume your social media and the beautiful fish that you've caught already this season. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, is it harder, or you've managed to get out, is it harder to be out, catch a few, and then have rivers that are unfishable, like we've had here, that I've barely been able to fish at all? Or has it been harder in some respects, having a taster of fishing and then having it snatched away from you?
Okay, Pete, where to begin with that one? How long have we got? I guess, okay, so it's frustrating, obviously. I was watching, as we all do, my phone and my laptop's populated with river level sites and weather forecasts, and a couple of my close friends, and I'll stand by it, I'll hold my hand up. They often say, Paul, you're overthinking it, but sometimes overthinking it, I think, is part of the success, Pete. And I will cross-reference several different forecasts for wind direction, just to give me not an edge in terms of casting, but where I'll find the most shelter and possibility of a fly hatch. All these things sort of knit together. I'll digress a little bit here, if that's okay. For example, if it's blowing a gale, we know that when upwinds emerge, the wings actually harden that much quicker with the breeze, and that breeze facilitates them getting airborne as well. However, so then if it's breezy, yes, you will get a hatch, but the fish might not be rising per se because they know that fly is just going to be whisked away. So what I will look for is still calmer areas afforded by twisting rivers and banks providing shelter, and that's all dependent on wind directions. So these sheltered areas, you've got the same hatch happening, but because it's sheltered, it takes that little bit longer for the fly to get airborne, and consequently, that's where you'll probably find a few rising fish. So going back to your question, Pete, leading up to the season, I was watching the weather and rubbing my hands together. I thought, oh, it's looking really peachy. Is this? The rivers are dropping away nicely. Several cloudy days on the horizon. And then I think, I wasn't following it then, I think the jet stream slipped south of the UK. Consequently, now we're in this trend of constant rain. We'll call it constant rain, but I can think of other words I prefer to use. And these winds, these nagging winds all the time. I'm looking out just now and the trees are bending over. And all of a sudden, our rivers went from a fishable level till 2 days before the start of the season, and they were peaks and troughs, and you just couldn't get near for a few days, which was frustrating. Had my first trip out, and you know, it's a funny old game. I've been fishing since the age of 15. I'm not going to disclose my age to you, Pete, or the listeners, but I'm the same age as you. That's up to you. um, but I've got well over 40 years experience, but it's still the same when you go out at the start of the season. Have I still got it? Will it work? And that's part of the magic for me is when you go out and you get that first fish under the belt, it's like, oh, geez, yeah, I'm back, and it's such a lovely feeling. But then, as you say, to taste that, and then it's sort of snatched away from you it is frustrating. But again, you've got to be a realist about you. Susan will tell you. I mean, I'm like a bear with a sore head. Yeah, you can't get near a river. Blah blah blah. And it only takes a few days of that, and I become quite cranky. I'll hold my hand up to that. So it is difficult. It is challenging, and you start you go to the extremes of thinking, am I living in the right country here? Do I need to relocate and think somewhere where there's a little bit more temperate and easygoing climate where the rivers are stable and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I found winter really difficult from a non-fishing perspective. I love grayling more from a sociable point of view, that having breakfast and seeing friends and everything that goes along with that. I seem to have come to terms with this season so far relatively okay. But you sit there and, like you say, we're getting of a vintage. There's still plenty of life in these old dogs yet. But you feel sometimes that the seasons are slipping away a little bit too quickly sometimes as well. Do you sense that?
Pete, geez, never a truer word spoken. A great observation. Yeah, you can probably sense a wobble in my voice there, because do you remember when you were a kid and you kind of wish your life away as a school kid, and time moves so slowly, and as you get older, the days, the months, the years just fly by. And you do. There are periods when, again, when you're 18, you feel immortal and you think you can do anything. And, Billy Big Balls, I can do this, I can do that. And you never think about that. But there is part of me, I'd be lying if I didn't admit to the listeners and yourself that, yeah, I do think, God, how many more seasons have I got left in me? And there's one for you, Pete. I think we've discussed it before. I do a heck of a lot of yoga, and it's all driven. I was discussing it with a friend just a couple of nights ago, and we were doing something. I arrived at his house and I gave him a hand, and I had to squeeze into this gap to get something, and he said, "Geez, how do you do that? How do you get down?" And I said, well, I just do a lot of exercise, not extreme exercise. I'm not an athlete, but I do a lot of yoga, and it is principally to keep supple and to keep me going, and it's based around fishing, and that is simply it. But yeah, to answer your question, I do think geez, how many more seasons? I see people older than myself who are a bit dithery on the legs and suffering a little bit immobile. And, there is part of me that thinks, when will I arrive there? When is that going to be?
It sounds like you're doing all the right things, and I even do little things like press ups and stuff like that. I remember you doing a yoga demonstration when you were down here as well, which was most impressive. And I sort of flirted with the idea of it myself. But those things you think about, and I think about, right, okay, as I get a little bit older, do I need to be fishing somewhere else? Does it have to be somewhere that's not quite so rocky, or do I have to choose somewhere? And so I'm thinking about those sorts of venues, perhaps 10, 15, 20 years down the line, so that we're in good shape and we can keep fishing as long as we possibly can, because it's so damn important to us, isn't it?
It is, and you just hit a nerve there. Again, a friend who was with the other night, he was inquiring because our rivers up here are politest way of putting it, are a little bit more rough and tumble than what you've got down there. Not in your immediate area, Pete. I guess I'm referring to the lardy-dardy, hoity-toity chalk streams. I've always got to get that into a podcast,
I know. Yeah.
No, joking aside. I mean, I love the chalk streams. Well, I'll touch on that in a moment because they give you things that our rivers certainly do not give you. But yeah, he was sort of nagging at me. Can you look into some chalk stream fishing for me, because I just can't do our rivers anymore. This clambering over fences, under gateways, blah blah blah. He's not capable of doing that, and he just wants some easier fishing, And I dread that day arriving. I really do. I hope it doesn't, but you've got to think that. Anyway, back to the chalk streams. Look, I love the chalk streams. They offer something different, and the key thing for me that they offer is this connection you get with fish through being able to see them, the behaviour. You sort of connect with that creature, and whether it's success, failure at the end of the day with a particular fish, you can learn so much about that observation. And that's why I try these days. New Zealand's one place, Chile was another. Some of the spring creeks, they call them in Europe, particularly in Bosnia, the Ribnik, in Slovenia, the Adrica, the Socha, the Bacha, they're absolutely gin clear, and it allows you to hunt fish by sight and see how fish behave, respond to your fly patterns. And it teaches you about fish tolerance levels and all these kind of things. So that is extremely important to me, Pete. I've found latterly these days I've become a little bit more relaxed. Again, I was discussing with a friend the other day. I can remember, and it's these 5 stages you go through. See if we can remember them off the top of our head. The first one is to catch a fish. I think the second one is to catch as many fish as possible. And I used to count. I used to have periods when I counted fish. Oh my God, I caught a dozen today. I caught 8 today, or I caught X today. And that was important to me, but that's no longer important to me. The important things to me are principally fly hatches, connecting with the fly hatch, fish observation, seeing how fish behave, what they do, and also spending time sometimes with friends, but not always. I'm a bit of a loner when it comes to fishing in some circumstances. Some people confuse that with being selfish, Pete, but it's being alone.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And fishing and fly fishing particularly, and river fishing is seen as that. And I know we've fished together a number of times, and I know how you like to roll with that. So it's absolutely fine with me. And I think that's the important thing when you fish with someone. As long as everyone knows what the ground rules are for that day, then that day is really, really easy and very, very easy to manage. But I wanted to move on a little bit more and take it in a slightly different direction, because you're so well known within the fishing community. And I just wondered what you like to do away from fishing, because myself and yourself and many others' lives are so deeply impacted and entrenched within fly fishing. But is there something that you can go do that takes you away, lets you cool down the jets for a little while and not concentrate so much on fishing? Is there another hobby, pastime, or something else that you're interested in that will take you away from it all?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a difficult. Thanks for the curveball, Pete. Appreciated. Okay, I thought we were here to talk about fishing. Right, I'm stalling for words, as you can see. Yeah. So first of all, I've one of my deepest connections and first loves before fishing was with wildlife itself. I just love watching wildlife. Of course, that's integral to fly fishing because when we're out, you can enjoy both sides of that, the fishing and enjoy watching and getting experiences with wildlife on the river. A couple of my friends we do the same. We message each other. I saw a peregrine falcon today, or this or that, and that's still a big thing for me. So some of my escapism, I just love. I like walking. Again, that's driven a little bit to keeping sort of um, myself in shape, but also in the countryside, seeing wildlife. Latterly, I guess I used to strum, and I will use the word strum the guitar. It's definitely not playing, Pete. I mean, I play all the right notes, but not necessarily in the right order. Um, so I used to dabble with that. That's become because of the movements lately. My sort of lifestyle that's become a little bit less. But Susan, my partner, she as you know Susan quite well. She's into photography and into art photography, and obviously as fishermen, photography is entrenched in us as well. So I get a little bit of escapism, and initially I didn't struggle with it, but well, let's say consequently, I found it is a great way to switch off because unfortunately I've got one of these stupid brains that just wants to tick over all the time. You know, when I come to sleep, for example, I find it difficult to switch off. And when I wake up, I'm turned on. I'm switched on. I've literally got to get up. I can't lie in or anything like that. So yeah, I seek escapism there, and it's been good for me because I think sometimes you've just got to take a deep breath, step back, and uh, sort of redial yourself into it, if you like. You know that I found that important. One time I went out as a youngster, as you do, out fishing like a bull at a gate kind of thing, and now I found I'm actually better. It's more productive for me to come away a little bit, and it's like this period. Okay, I am frustrated, champing at the bit to be out on the rivers, but a little bit of downtime occasionally doesn't hurt.
Let's move on. That's fascinating to hear, and I think it's really important that we do have passions away from fishing, and people like yourself are so well known for fishing, and it's lovely for listeners to get a sense of your other interests as well. And the guitar, bring it down next time you're here. I'm equally as bad on keyboards, so I'm sure we can
I
string
think
something together. Yeah.
I think there'll be something. I think with a little bit of Vino Collapso on board, I think something will be happening there.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
think we'll be recording that though somehow. But I wanted to
yeah,
move on a little bit more and talk about your mayfly patterns that you did for Fully Meal, because the moment that they came out, I bought some of those. They were excellent.
thank you,
Have you got
Pete.
anything else in the pipeline with those guys?
Yeah, so initially we started. I mean, fair play to Steve Carew from Fulling Mill. He's been a bit of the driving force here. Steve and I have got a great sort of working relationship, and what we're doing at the moment, we're launching. We're just working on. I'm just providing the samples. Is a New Zealand range of flies, which will be quite unique because when I first went to New Zealand, again, as you did, you do your homework, you get genned up, you see some of the patterns, and for want of a better word, yeah, they were recognised seasoned flies. But I went there after my first year, photographed a lot of the insects and bugs, came back, and as we do as fly tyers, we tinker and came up, devised my own interpretation of those. consequently, they went on to be very, very extremely successful patterns. I've shared them with people, give them to people going to New Zealand, tied them for customers going to New Zealand. And then Steve Carew, bless him, latched onto some of these and approached me. And yeah, we're doing quite a unique New Zealand range of flies, which hopefully will be launched. Well, certainly it's in the pipeline for 2025. So I'm quite excited about that. But yeah, appreciate your little bit of support with buying some of the mayfly patterns as well.
And they were really good, and they've caught me fish. And even the other day that I was fishing your active mayfly done on the Derbyshire Wye, which is, as you know, dry fly only on the Peacock water. And we were trying to use some bigger caddis patterns to see if we could bring some fish up because they weren't rising. And I snipped the tail off. Sorry.
Yeah.
And
No,
there was a hint of caddis about it, and I caught some fish on it, which was really, really cool. So kudos for that. And I look forward to seeing the next one. If that's not a good enough excuse to go to New Zealand, is your fly patterns, I don't know what there is. But I wanted to...
Pete, we don't need any excuse to go to New Zealand, really.
So we're going to move on some more. And I know you're incredibly modest about this, but you're also guiding. And I'm sure there are many people who would love to spend time on the water with you. Have you enjoyed it?
Okay, well, I know you sort of went through a period, Pete, where you turned it into an extremely professional business, and fair play to you. I really admire that. And at the time, I was doing some guiding, and for want of a better word, some people will disagree. I've spoke to some other guys. I experienced a little bit of burnout. Okay, I don't know what it was. I'm not going to try and explain it. It just didn't seem attractive to me anymore. And look, let's be honest. This fly fishing game we're in, it's struggled. It's a struggle to make a living from. And that's not me bleating on or after sympathy or anything like that. I know it's the same for you, Pete. I know it's the same for anybody in this profession. So we're principally in it for the love. So if some of that shine sort of disappears, it's difficult to motivate yourself, and that's what happened with guiding. Maybe I was doing a little bit too much, day after day, and they are long days. You're up early, you're checking those river levels, and your clients are always messaging you the night before. What's it like, especially if it's touch and go. I've just experienced this the last couple of days. I lost 3 days guiding this last week, Pete, because the rivers just came up too high. So there's always this ticking over in the background as well. So I kind of walked away from it for a while, and then a couple of people came to me, and they were great guys, and we had first of all we had a great connection, and they were quite modest. They didn't come to me saying I can land the fly on a two pence piece, which incidentally you don't need to do, as you and I know. I mean, I'll digress very quickly. Usually my first cast goes in short. It's better a short cast going in than overshooting the cast and lining the fish. And also that slightly shorter cast allows you to gauge any little sort of microcurrents that perhaps you haven't spotted. Anyway, yeah, back on track. So they were quite modest. Well, we're at this stage, and we just had an absolute ball. Consequently, that gave me the enthusiasm again, Pete, and I've built up a clientele of that I know where they're at. I know their expectations, and I can deliver. And yeah, I'm having a great time at the moment, and I've got heavily back into guiding, and it's great fun. I am enjoying it. And by the way, I take on new clients, and I actually enjoy. Most people will call me because, as you said, I have this reputation, dry fly, this, that, the other. When I'm with clients, I listen to what they say, and some clients want to do the dry fly experience. Some just want to catch fish. So we'll look at alternatives like spider fishing, nymph fishing, And I actually like beginners. Often beginners will call, and maybe I haven't got the experience. I love beginners because you've got a blank canvas, and you can not mould them into a mini me per se. But I knew you'd start chuckling at that one. Um, but they advance so much quicker because they haven't got this ingrained philosophy about fly fishing. And we've all heard this thing, and in some respects it's true. And I think it comes from the dreaded salmon fishing is to catch a fish, your fly's got to be in the water nearly all the time. There are days I'll only make a handful of casts if I'm fishing for myself, and I still get what the rewards I need to do. But people will come to you, and we've got people who have come up through some fly fishing background, and especially still water. Fly's got to be in the water. I've got to be fishing the fly. And I think observation's a big thing these days. It's the highest percentage of my fishing. And I can often, like I say, mould, for want of a better word, or encourage my clients to have a look at that aspect of fishing as well. And it's very rewarding. You learn so much from it.
And as a guide, I've got to ask that question because I always ask, how does that fish feel when it goes in the net for the first time when you're guiding?
Oh man, it's just yeah. It's probably, I get it now. I didn't used to when I was younger, but putting your client on a fish, especially a good fish or a challenging fish, and they catch that, it is as good as catching that fish yourself. It's pretty special, and especially if you've had an example, one or two clients, which I really admire, and that's why we click, is they'll come and they will hold out, Paul, I'm looking for a trophy, I'm looking for a big fish. And it might get to 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll often say, look, I don't think it's going to happen. The hatch hasn't been of substance to pull big fish out. Should we bail and just get a few fish under the belt? And credit to my clients. A couple of them have said, no, I'll hold out for big fish. And we've had a day of a blank, and then next day maybe blank, and then the third day you find an ape and they nail it. And man, that feeling's just, it's just so special. But that's credit to the client, because if they'd have said to me on the first day, let's just go and trundle some nymphs down a run or two and get a couple of fish under the belt, I'd have happily done that. But again, that's just listening to what people want on the day.
And that's really cool to hear because I think it's easy for a guide to just do what they did the previous day. And the most important question is, what do you want from your day? Because it's that person's one. But having the added advantage of somebody like yourself is that, like you said, with beginners particularly, but you can sort of say, right, okay, look, we've caught some fish this way. Do you want to see this way? We're going to try and stalk some fish, and it must be very pleasing to be able to show them the way that you fish, because I know if I was booking you as my guide, I'd want to learn how to fish how you fish, and those days must be in a different way really, really cool to host too.
They're fantastic. I've got one client in particular who lives in the deep south, and he travels up specifically, and his days are exactly that. He said, Paul, it's not about numbers. I want us to fish together, and we'll drop on a fish, and he'll sometimes he'll ask me, he'll say, what approach would you use here? And I'll say this, I would actually drop back, cross the river because I've got a better angle. The currents aren't going to sort of affect the drift, or I'll come up this bank. And conversely, sometimes we'll arrive on a fish and I'll say, well, what do you want to do here? How would you approach this? And then sometimes we second guess, and we'll both have a different opinion. I'll say, well, go on, let's see which approach will work. And that's not definitive. It's not a science, as we know, Pete, because every situation, every single fish is individual, and every fishing situation we're in is unique to itself. So you can't put a measure on it or anything like that, but it will give you a little bit of guidance, And he's a great guy, and he'll often come, and we'll spend the first day, again, like us, he doesn't really grilling fish, so he'll admittedly arrive and, I'm a little bit rusty. can we, almost apologetic and sort of say, let's just cover casting for the first day, techniques under trees, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, well, let's just go down to the river and we'll begin like that. But if we find some fish, it'd be rude not to sort of give them some, some attention. So, yeah, I just tailor the days, and it's just so nice. It sounds like a cliche, I know, but it's so nice working with individuals like that. But I found consequently now I'm trying to surround myself with people of that ilk who were both on the same page, and everybody gets something from the day, which is very important, of course.
Yeah.
And it's not always about nailing a fish either. You can learn lessons just in the throes of write something about blanking. We all blank. I blank. There's all these kind of things, and you've got to learn from it. It's no good coming away with your head down. It's coming away thinking, could I have done something different? This second guessing that I'm sort of well known for. So you've got to start thinking like that, and everybody gets something from a day, even when we get a blank.
Nice. Nicely put. Nicely put. I want to move things on a little bit now. And you're vice president of both Wild Fish and the Wild Trout Trust. Has it been pleasing to see the volume turned up on conservation issues?
Well, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I listened to your podcast recently with Nick Measham from Wild Fish Conservation. Really interesting. Nick's a friend. I'm not full disclosure here. Nick's a good friend of mine. But Nick, from a professional aspect, has taken Wild Fish Cons. I mean, what he has done through his sort of leadership there is just amazing. I mean, it's now an organisation that's got some teeth, and they're really getting hold of it, taking the perpetrators to task, which is really, really pleasing to see. I'm very proud of that. We're set to do some filming with Nick and some clips to try and up the ante, because again, sometimes, certainly in my youth, far, far, far away, a long time ago in another universe, apathy ruled okay. And you didn't really get involved with these organisations, ashamedly, because you thought they had other agendas. I mean, as we know, wild fish cons used to be called salmon and trout conservation, with the emphasis on salmon. So you would often think, as I did, what are they doing for trout? But we know all that has changed. It's now wild fish cons, the emphasis on fish, all species of fish, and they're doing a fantastic job. And we should all, in our own way, support these organisations, because it's very, very important. It's been highlighted latterly. There was halcyon days, I remember, on my local rivers. Salmon would be running willy-nilly. You could go on, ashamedly back then. I was occasionally prone as a child to extracting fish by other means. And you could kind of, you can read between the lines there, Pete. It was a bottomless pit, but that's no longer. Them days are over. We've all got to be very, very conscious, very, very aware. And they're doing great work. And the Wild Trout Trust, I mean, I just gave a day to them for the trust. Lovely young guys come, Henry, I think he's called, can't remember his last name. He sort of bid on the day, won the day, and we've had a little bit of communication, and youngish guy, looking forward to him coming up and spending a day with him. And it's that kind of thing that's important, Pete. It really is. So, yeah, fiercely proud to be, first of all, vice president of both them organisations. And, of course, it's so pleasing to see both Nick Measham and Sean Leonard from the Wild Trout Trust. Again, Sean has just been such a catalyst in gaining traction for the Wild Trout Trust and taking it to where it is today.
Nicely put on all of that. I also, if you are a member of Wild Fish, go on their website. I bought and had delivered the other day, and Emma and I have been playing it because we can't fish. the wild fish top trumps, which is absolutely fantastic. And again, if you're from a certain vintage, you'll remember top trumps. It's been absolutely brilliant seeing those fish and playing top trumps again, which I played. And I've been on eBay this morning looking at trying to find the old original top trumps games that I played when I was a kid all those years ago. And the fish one from Wild Fish is absolutely awesome.
Pete, I've still got a Top Trumps original in its little plastic container,
Yeah.
and it's cars, it's racing cars, I believe. So yeah, I've got the original there. You and I have come to some arrangement after the end of the podcast.
I've seen them on. I saw that online this morning. I think the first one I had was tanks. We're going way off thinking now, but there's all these ones, and there was one that you could collect a certain amount of tokens and then send off, and I've bid on that this morning, and it's just those little things. But the fish one was really, really good fun, and I think Emma and I will have a game of that a little bit later. But I would echo what you say, Sean, Nick, the work that they're doing. We had Nick down recently, and he came onto the river and swung a few flies for salmon because it was too big for anything else. And I can only shout loudly like you are about what these organisations are doing. I don't want to go down that dark hole that we know about. We're all aware of that, and I don't want to preach to people who knows, but we know that we've got people fighting our corner. That's the important thing. But let's move on some more as well. And Emma, who you know well, fishes for salmon, she said she could never match my passion for trout and has never really done it with any real intent. Susan, your partner, is a super keen angler, and having fished with her is highly skilled. Is it fun having someone who shares your passion?
Absolutely, without reservation. We got together through fishing, and yeah, it's great. I mean, I guess you put me on the spot here, Pete. I've got to be careful what I say. I guess like Susan and Emma know each other as you know, and I guess a little bit like Emma, Susan would probably admit if pressed that she hasn't got the super passion that I have. I'm go out at any cost, any weather. I'm going, you know. So that's not to say she's a fair weather fisher, but it is good. It's really enjoyable. We have some great days together, some great trips. We've got some trips organised for later this year, and it's nice to have somebody who shares that. I'll be brutally honest, Pete. If she was as crazy about it as me, it maybe wouldn't work because we'd be pushing each other out of the way on the next rising fish kind of thing. So yeah, it's been it's enriched my life and my fishing life, certainly without question.
And you've done some salt water together as well. Is that fun?
So, well, look, I've done a fair bit of salt water. Susan again would she's definitely more into the salt water. Not that I am, but look, there's only my love for salmo trotter, brown trout is just unwavering. Give me to sum it up, give me a day at bonefish or a day at wild brown trout. Wild brown trout would win every day of the week. There's no question about it. But in the winter we do go saltwater fishing, and there is something I've done a fair bit. I've been lucky to travel in through what we do, Pete. I've been lucky to travel and experience some places and destinations that offer sensational saltwater fishing, and I love it. I love there is a great sense of freedom when you're doing it, being able to walk around in shorts and flip flops. Well, I do that anyway, but it's a lot damn warmer when you're doing it in a tropical climate. But and again, it's the visual aspect of it. You know, this bone fishing. Especially if you're wading a flat, you see them from a long way away if the conditions are right, of course, and you're able to maneuver yourself, position yourself to ambush them. And it's almost like trout fishing subsurface, if that makes sense. Because again, you're connecting with that creature, you're trying to sort of outwit it and all these things, and you've got all that to deal with. And I just find it's so damned exciting, and that's what it should be. So I do. I know the good thing is, obviously, it takes place in winter. And tough call, Pete. Mm, mm. River Eden, River Wharf, 3 foot up, carrying colour, or bone fishing. There's only one
Yeah.
winner, isn't there? There's only one winner there.
I think you're right. I do think you're right. Did you find then? I remember we spoke when we were first going on some trips down to Mexico. But did you feel that you slotted into bone fishing more naturally because of how you fish, the spotting of the fish, the accuracy, the casting skill as well? Did you find that was a easier fit for you from that point of view? Whereas I know, and as you know, that a lot of people take some time to settle into bone fishing on a trip, and it might take them a day, sometimes a little bit longer. But did you find it was a natural fit for you?
It was seamless, Pete. To be honest, it was seamless. Just straight in. Like I said, to me, I just treated it very much like I do trout, and that cautious approach, wading, moving about quietly, stealthily. And again, one of the big things that on my very first trip, that you must have this ability to cast 30 yards and drop it within a circle of 2 feet. Again, utter rubbish, absolute utter rubbish. If It's amazing, and some of my biggest bonefish have come from like 10 or 15 feet away. In fact, the leader's been in the rod tip when the fish has eaten the fly. And that having that experience so close, especially if it's a big bonefish, it's electrifying. It's just sensational. So yeah, it was so easy for me. I just streamlined right into that beat, and loved it from the off. Did my first trip down to Mexico. I was doing Belize before Mexico in 2008, and first trip to um, Mexico in 2008, Punta Allen with Jonathan Tomlinson, who then worked for Sportfish. We did it with Fly Odyssey. I returned every year, and the trip just got longer. It went from 1 week to 2 weeks to 3 weeks to a month. So yeah, just some great times down there and sensational fishing.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there as well about the not having to cast long distances, because I bought that bonefish book, 30 years ago, probably longer ago than that. And there weren't many books about it. There wasn't that much information. There was, of course, no internet. But it put me off bonefish for a very, very long time, simply because I thought you had to make, like you say, 30-yard casts into the wind, and the guide would scream at you if you got it wrong. And I
Yeah,
thought, I go fishing for fun. I don't want to be shouted at if I'm on holiday, and I don't take to authority very well anyway. And so I probably wouldn't have enjoyed that. And of course, then when I went, I can't remember where I first went, Bahamas or somewhere, it was completely different. And it was fantastic. It was like trout fishing. And that's why I asked that question, because it isn't what you think it is it at all?
absolutely not. No, so certain for want of a better word, authorities, if you like, or people. Again, I grew up on a diet of reading magazines as you did, and you couldn't get your hands on the latest copy, and you hung on every word. And I can remember reading pieces about bonefish, and you had to be this super slick caster and effortlessly punch 30 yards out, as you say, into a headwind. And then when I first experienced it, and especially if you're wading on your own, I I tend to use a guide just to get me to a flat, and then I give him a rod and say, bugger off in the other direction, let me do my own thing. And if I mess it up, that's my fault. I just like that, Pete. I just like being on my own, taking my time. And if there's any advice for anybody thinking of a trip, if you're on a flat, when you see fish a long way off, try and judge. I know they change direction, it can be random. Sometimes, especially on influence of the tide, if it's a making tide or an ebbing tide, they'll head in a certain direction. Just try and line yourself up early to get on collision course with them, and it's so damned relaxed. You can just let them come, and often you'll get 2 or 3 shots at them. So it's not this sort of frantic cast quickly, 2 o'clock, 30 feet, 40 feet, 100 feet, blah blah blah. I have experienced that, as you probably have, and I just switch off from the guide. I just do my own thing. Um, but if you're on a flat on your own, I believe often you've just got so much time. And the other key thing is, don't again, when we're wading a flat, we tend to always look in front of us. Just periodically glance behind. It's amazing how many fish come in
Yeah.
the other direction and sneak up on you.
Yeah, particularly when you've been wading up and all the stuff's coming up from your feet as well. That I
Mm.
have had fish follow that up as well. So definitely works from that front. I wanted to move on to tackle, and I'm excited to hear you've joined Guideline. It sounds to me like a really, really good fit. And having had Jim Curry on the pod, he's really passionate about the brand, but equally as much about the people behind it. Did you get the same sense, and was that something that played into your decision too?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you mentioned Jim again. I listened to not all of it yet, but I will be going back. I listened to some of Jim's podcasts with you. You and I know Jim. There's a sort of vested interest here because he was part of the Cards on Table time again, part of the AAP guy organization. When I think you might disagree, some listeners might disagree. There was a certainly for us, and that's where we met, Pete, if you remember, at AAP
Yep.
Guy. We had a
Yep.
fabulous night where I believe did you pass your advanced on that one? And I think I
Yes.
just got my provisional.
Yep.
And fortunately, we got sat on the same table, and boom, we were just at it like we'd known each other for several years. And Jim was part of AAP Guy in a sort of senior role. Well, I think he certainly examined me. He was one of the examiners. And Jim and I met a lot of years ago, embarrassingly a lot of years ago, like 40 odd years ago, I suspect. And we've known each other. There's been a lot of mutual respect. We've both done our own thing. But when I came back to AAP Guy back in the day, and that was a fair few years ago, Pete, um, Jim, I was impressed with Jim. I know you're possibly thinking, well, you're just saying that because you're kind of involved with him, but he sort of moved on leaps and bounds, and especially in the casting sort of arena where he was he was so slick, and you need to be around them people to better yourself because that's what drives you. So, yeah, I've known Jim and we connected then again, and he's extremely passionate. But it's been a massive influence. I am very excited to be joining Guideline, Pete. And a big part of the influence is the CEO, the guys holding right at the top. They're all passionate anglers. They're all passionate anglers. The messaging me was swapping fly patterns, where information, what tippet you guys use, and it's so damned interesting. And I just love it. And Jim, again, we've got this WhatsApp group going, and everybody's chipping in and everything in the melting pot. And there's only good can come out of that bit. There really is. There's only positive vibes, and that's essentially what I'm getting as well from being on board with them guys. And again, it's one of them. I wouldn't say they've hit the light under a bushel, if you like, but it's one of them brands that when you start looking at the rod range, they've got all bases covered, which is quite nice to know. So I'm very excited about the future with these guys, in particular working with Jim, Frederick, Runa, Chris, some of the other boys. I'm just so looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a great lineup, as you've actually said. And I always go by some of these tackle things, and mainly as a trout man, that they have some really interesting rod lengths, the longer, lighter lines, which must be of great interest to you too.
Yeah, well, as you know, the Scandinavian company, and the Scandis, like many Europeans, sometimes I just seem that little bit more in front of us in terms of advancement with fly fishing, certainly in Europe, where it's part of my fishing comes from now with the longer rod, and it definitely facilitates my style of fishing, longer, lighter rods. For example, they're doing a 10 foot 8 two weight, a 10 foot 2 weight, 3 weight. That's absolute magic to my ears, and they're the kind of rods that I hanker for. Everybody's different. Again, there's not one rod to rule them all. I had to get my Lord of the Rings sort of fix in there, Pete. But we're all individuals. We all sense feeling differently in terms of fly casting. It's subjective. And again, I'm not hard and fast on people. They'll ask me for recommendations. I'll say, this works for me. You might want to try this, that, X, Y, or Z. Everybody's different, but certainly for my style, those longer rods suit what I do. In terms of dry fly, to spider fishing, to a degree, obviously nymph fishing. We know the Euro style of nymphing demands those longer rods as well. But I'll confess, I know the method, but it's not a sort of go-to method for me, Pete. It's sort of the last lineup for no other reason than I enjoy and have grown up traditionally with other styles that I like to pursue aesthetically.
Nice. I know you talk about the 10 footers as well, and I've got from their stable a 9'9". I think it's a 2 weight, which is a cracker. And for me, being a river angler who grew up fishing smaller streams in the 7.5 foot to the 8.5 foot range, when that was your river rod, that a 10 foot, although I could handle one, always felt alien to me. I think psychologically more than anything else. Whereas the 9'9", just being that tiny bit shorter, it must be psychological that I can use that with great ease and think it's a cracking little rod. So there must be a lot. It must be fun getting to know some of the stuff that you didn't know so much about.
Absolutely. Well, it is. I mean, Runa is he's sort of the technical guy there, and he and I are in constant touch. And his sort of take on it is such an eye opener for me, Pete. And I'm personally going to benefit as well in terms of my understanding, which is that's the kind of guy I am. I like to know the whys and wherefores, not that he just does this. But the interesting point you made there, Pete, about 10 foot. Yeah, 10 foot rod, all things being equal, 10 foot 4 weight versus a 9 foot 4 weight, he's going to feel alien because of the swing weight difference on the longer rod. And you're absolutely right. As we both know, competition anglers use a rod of 9 foot 3 inches because that's the length of rod that will generate the highest line speeds. So if you're quite close to that, you're going to get high line speeds, i.e. a 9 foot rod, a 9 foot 3, or go 3 inch the other way, 9 foot 6. So just creeping up to 9 foot 9 is not a million miles away from that magical 9 foot 3, if that's what you strive for. But it will feel a lot crisper than a 10 foot rod. So it isn't psychological, Pete. You're absolutely right. Just trust your feelings there. Getting back onto Star Wars, feel for the Force and all that kind of stuff.
The force is strong there, and that's a very good point. Yeah. That you're exactly right. That it does feel to me much easier to work with, and crisp is exactly the word. I think if I were pressed to use, that would be it. I hope they're going to be tapping into your skills as well.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, the wheels are in motion, and I'm looking forward to spending some time, especially with Runa and Frederick, some of the key people in there, which is going to happen shortly, Pete. So watch this space.
Nice. So the weather's shitty. We're not able to fish. You've tied a few flies. What else have you got planned for this year? Are you travelling widely?
Well, Susan and I have got a couple of trips we're just looking at now. We haven't pressed the go button, and principally just to get back into it. I mean, not in terms that I haven't been away from it, but that it's this winter thing. You have a spell off from it. Yes, you need a wee break, but equally, it's so nice having your finger on the pulse, seeing the river every day, or rivers, or being out, seeing hatches start, and when you clock the first fly. I keep a diary, as you know, Pete, and it's not to write in, today I caught 10 fish, or, missed two and broke off on one, or whatever. Why I have to put that silly voice on? Um, but it's more about water temperatures, air temperature, wind direction, and the density of fly I'm seeing and what species I'm seeing. And I know that all sounds nerdy, but it's amazing how you can look back and within a day or two of a previous year or years that you'll see the same species of fly. And sometimes you don't. Sometimes they arrive 10 days early, which kind of puts you. It just makes you think where it's going, and you've got to have your finger on the pulse, and that's what I certainly enjoy, is just being out there on a daily basis and seeing the season develop or grow, and consequently at the back end watching what happens when we've got autumn and preparation for winter.
They're really good points there as well. And I've also come to the conclusion that you feel close with your home water. And I often say there's no place like home, is there?
Yeah, I'm lucky. I've relocated, Pete, and I've got my home river. It's exactly five minutes from my doorstep now, and in the other direction, I've got another river that's 7 minutes away. So yeah, I'm extremely lucky like that. And there is, I mean, what the advantage is there is I can nip down at any point, even on the days it's not fishing like today. Probably after lunch, it's way too big. It's over a metre up. Probably just take a tootle along, just have a look, see what flies about. There's absolutely, the rod will be in, but I know there's no chance of a fish. But it's just nice keeping your eye on it, seeing what's happening, or today I saw the first granum or whatever, for example. And then next time you go, I'm not one of these for carrying 20 fly boxes. I have the mothership where I keep all my fly boxes, and then load my chest pack up for the time of year. Occasionally you will get bitten on the backside and caught out. Your one hatch will be earlier than you expected, and damn, I've left that fly box, my beetle box or my terrestrial box in the car. I should have brought it along, that kind of thing. But yeah, I tend to fish like that. Don't carry. I mean, I fish with a pack on my back because of the cameras, and if I'm guiding, carrying lunch and flasks and things like that, which is my preference these days. So my chest pack will be just loaded up with a handful of fly boxes, which I perceive seasonal at any given time.
Nice. I like that a lot. And I was thinking actually, and you'll know with the Fulling Mill, their new fly patch thing that they've got. And I wrote something for them. I don't know that they're going to use it, but I offered it to them, that the way that I thought that patch would work really well, because I think it holds like something like, if listeners don't know it, it's sort of a thing that fits on your fishing vest. It's probably slightly bigger. Again, we're showing our age here, or I'm showing my age, of sort of an old cassette case. And then you can lift it up and it'll hold, each side of it will hold a bunch of flies. And then there's foam and magnet on the front. And my thought with that was, instead of filling that up with flies that you think you're going to use it as a fly patch. And then when the flies have dried, put them inside the patch so that you're building up, like you say, Paul, your seasonal fly box, so that you're continually adding to it, and then you might take things out. So instead of just putting random patterns in, you're building up a mini box away from the mothership, as you say, that you're adding to the whole time. So you've got your go-to rather than that one. And we know when we get a new fly box, we put one in there, there'll be a fly in there that we never ever bloody use, but it looks pretty or it looks nice, so we feel we might put it in. But doing it that way, I think that you've got something that's relevant and you're building it with relevant flies that you're actually using. Does that make sense, or is it the ramblings of a madman?
Pete, you've just hit such a nerve there. This is what I love about these chats, and it's one thing I love. I'll digress first. Is when you sat on a panel of anglers talking to an audience, often your fellow sort of speakers, if you like, will somebody will chirp up with a question, blah blah blah. Then Paul, what do you think? I'll rabbit on about something. Go to the next guy. It could be someone like and I'm only saying it because I've been lucky enough to sit with them on panels. People like Charles Jardine, sadly, the great Malcolm Greenhalgh, who's passed away, and obviously Oliver, who's sadly passed away recently. But I've been very fortunate to be, first of all, included in that company and sat on a lineup. But often, I don't know if it was because bless them all, I was the youngest at the time, Pete, but it seemed that the guy, any question, they'd come to me first. What do you think, Paul? And it kind of, you've got to lead off with it while the others have got the luxury of thinking up their answers. But the good thing is, what I wanted to say is often then someone like Charles will say so-and-so, blah, 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 and then it presses another button in your head, and then you're putting your hand up, me, miss, and then you say, by the way, I forgot to mention this, and that's come from one of your fellow, contributors. And what you've just said is absolutely right. Getting back on track is that I've got exactly the same fully milled fly patch. First of all, what you're saying, regardless of the fly patches, often at the end of the season, you'll see what I fished in the season in that fly box, because a fly will be snipped off. Next trip out, I'll fish it. Then let's say it's a beetle pattern, and then I run into a granum patch. Beetle will be clipped off, put in the patch. Now that beetle won't then be transferred back to its main fly box where all the other beetles are. It'll just sit in the fly patch for convenience. And then I'll fish this gramen. At the end of the day, the granum will be clipped off, put in this fly patch, and consequently, as you say, there's an accumulation of the telling flies in that. And often I will end up, after the first few weeks, that'll just build up, and I'll fish my whole season out of that fly box. And yeah, that is a good fly box. There's only one thing, bizarrely, and I've spoke with the powers that be at Fulling Mill, is it's currently designed. It won't trigger to you because you're a right-hander. It's not geared up for left-handers, because our flip, I put the flies in the opposite way, if that makes sense. So I need to turn it upside down, very much like Hendrix did with his guitar, I suppose.
That's a lovely way to bring it up, and you've segued beautifully. I know I've thrown a few fastballs at you, which you've hooked rather than ducked out the way of, which great kudos for that. But we have this fly culture playlist thing on Spotify. Are you going to give me a song for that?
You've sprung that one on me, Pete. Okay. Rather than dwell, I could think up all kinds of nice, sophisticated music, but I'm just straight off the top of my head, and it's one I used to play when I was driving out in the morning in New Zealand. U2, It's a Beautiful Day, and I'm principally picking that because the weather is so crappy at the moment, as you say. So it gives me a good feel-good factor when I'm heading out fishing.
Nice choice, mate. And I'm going to add that very, very shortly. For listeners, I'm sure many, many people listening to this already follow you on social media. Your handles, websites, anything else that people want to get hold of you, if they want to learn to fish and spend a bit of time with you, how do they find you?
Certainly on Instagram, it's Paul Procter Fly Fish. And same on Facebook. There's two avenues. There's two sites, but I just prefer the Paul Procter one. And you'll probably see they'll find me easy enough. It's just some trout bum photographs, and there we go. So very, very, very easy to find. You can find me on LinkedIn under Paul Procter Fly Fish as well, but I tend not to use that avenue so much. The world can become. It's important to stay connected, but we can get bogged down with it as well, Pete, I believe. But thank you for that, Pete.
Nice. And, well, we've spoken well over an hour now. I've enjoyed, as always, talking with you, catching up. I love how this podcast, the directions that it's gone in, and people have got to learn a lot from you, but also a little bit more about you if they don't know you so well, which is really important to me because, like you say, I've known you a long time. I know what a great man you are. You are at the peak of your powers, and long may those continue. You've got some exciting things happening, which is always great to see. I'm so thrilled to know you. I'm so thrilled that you're in fishing and you're a very important part of the fabric of fishing. So it's great to speak with you. Thank you so much for talking with me, mate. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Pete, the very kind words, appreciate them a lot. And likewise, I mean, again, just thanks for the invite. I love chatting with you and just sharing things. It's an important part of our fly fishing these days, and it's nice to be able to do that. So thank you for that opportunity.
You're welcome, mate. Well, thank you for being a guest. And everyone, this has been another episode of the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as me. And as ever, there'll never be any charge for these. It's just lovely to talk to friends about fishing, and hopefully you enjoy this listen as well. And you have similar conversations with your fishing friends too. But as ever, there'll be plenty more of these coming down the line. But thanks so much for listening to the Fly Culture Podcast.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly published magazine owned and run by fly anglers. When it comes to fly fishing, we've got you covered.